Yes, my name's Luke Payson, and I am honored to have on for the second time on the show, Kyle Zimick. Kyle, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Last time you were on the show, you were talking about previewing your main event fight for Brawl in the Burgh 17 versus Justin the General Patton. It was on a 3-fight win streak. People, I encourage you to go back and watch that because you talk about why you wanted to take a guy who had a lot more pro fights than you. You were 1-0 at the time. You went into Brawl in the Burgh 17 and won in just incredible fashion with a submission.
Thank you.
Really, really impressive. So let's just jump in there and talk about it from your perspective. Obviously, you were the main event on an absolutely incredibly stacked card. It was jam-packed. It was just incredible. So I guess before I ask you about the fight itself, what you had never fought for 247 before. What was it like coming in? Obviously, enemy territory, but also the promotion and kind of the big event feel for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, ultimately, yeah, I thought it was really, really professionally run. I thought it was super smooth. Sometimes on the regional scene, you can get a little hiccups in the backstage and stuff like that, but I thought it was really, really, really professionally done, which, for the first time coming into enemy territory, as you said, like, I appreciated that because it's like, you can just do everything you need to do. No hiccups, no worries. Get the job done.
That makes a lot of sense. I know Ryan Middleton and everybody at 247 is constantly trying to get feedback from fighters, both the hometown fighters and the out of town fighters, because they want to be a great promotion where people want to fight for them. So I know that they're always happy to hear that. And, individually, you can always text or message one of them if you saw some room for improvement, because that's also well received. Hunter Homisick or Ryan Middleton, or even me, if you want to let me know, I'll pass it on. But obviously, an incredible night for you. Let's walk through the fight from your perspective. It was all over the place. It was a super entertaining fight from all the moments. So what was your experience? Because you're the fighter in there, having to process what's happening. You can't necessarily be thinking about what happened 30 seconds ago. You got to stay in the moment. So kind of walk us through it.
Yeah, we thought he was going to be a little more offensive grappling wise. He was doing a good job staying at range, looking to use his strikes, and counter me coming in. It seemed like that was pretty much his game plan, and then find takedowns and close the distance if he needed to. Yeah, right away, we got into a little bit of a scramble. He ended up with a nice body lock, just putting me on the fence. And it was like right from the get-go, I was like, well, here we go. It's funny because it's like those are the fights situations where you don't always like looking at it, like think like, oh, this is a high-paced fight. But when you're doing that cage work, it's like it's a grind in there, So it was like right from the get-go, it was like, here we go. Like this is gonna be a war. And yeah, like you said, it was kind of just all over the place. It was like one of us would get a body lock, we'd do some fence work, one of us would find a takedown, the other one would scramble out, get back to our feet. We had some exchanges where I would close the distance. We were in the pocket just throwing heat at each other. So yeah, I mean, it really just took place everywhere, and it was a good fight, good confidence builder, good experience for both of us. And yeah, at the end of the night, I ended up slipping in that guillotine and closing the show.
Yeah, you very humble in the way you said that. It was a very impressive guillotine. I know in cage, I asked, there was sweat, there was blood, you were bleeding, he was bleeding, and obviously in some ways that makes submissions harder because you'll see sometimes people slip off submissions, but in other ways, a rear naked choke or what you got a guillotine can sometimes slide in deeper faster because it's slippery in. Your timing was perfect. There was a couple moments. There was one, and I think it was in the final round. I'm trying to remember. There was a moment where he initiated a takedown, and you somehow ended up on top by the time you landed. Do you remember that? I made a comment about how quick your transitions. I remember mentioning that beforehand, how fast your transitions are, and my keys to victory, your quick transitions. but your hips, like how good are your hips? Because he's known as a grappler, well-rounded. I mean, he was coming in on 3-fight win streak as a stud himself. But how often do you see that in training where you're like in air, you're fat, it's almost like the squirrel where you're in air and you're able to like turn your body in air. How often do you do things like that?
So for me, I train with a lot of bigger guys. So I find myself in those situations more often than I like to sometimes, kind of getting manhandled, thrown around a little bit, and you learn little areas where you can just make those quick little pivots with your hips, or like in that case, I specifically remember like feeling like I could budge his arm just enough to make that transition with my hips. And then once I did, he kept going for it, and I was able to just kind of sprawl out on top of it and ended up on top.
Yeah, I mean that wasn't the finishing sequence because you ended up doing a guillotine from the bottom, but that's probably, besides the finish, that's what really stood out to me. It's cool that you were able to break that moment down and that you had awareness. I know sometimes I interview fighters and they say, oh, I'll have to watch it because they just flow, which is fine. But it's cool that you felt him going for the takedown and thought I can get a little bit of, movement here, because that was a really cool moment. And obviously it was all over the place. Walk through the guillotine. You got it in deep. You did the classic close guard up high over his butt, over his hips to pull him down. He tried to push your leg off. That was like his last attempt, because if he could push your leg down, then he could kind of hike his rear end up to the ceiling and get some space for his blood flow. So like, how did you know that was going? Was it when his arm failed to clear your leg, you thought at that point it was pretty good, or kind of what was your thinking process before you tapped?
Yeah, when it slipped in there, I made my first bite, started, working on it, and right away I just felt like I got his head down.
Yeah.
And once I got that head down, it was like I knew the neck was in there. We were slippery and everything, but with that bite, you can really get a good torque on it. And then I felt him like try to push my legs, but I had just a good enough bite of his hips to where I could really arch his back.
Yeah.
And it's like once you get that arch in the head and the back, it's pretty difficult to slide out of there sometimes. You're playing with very limited time, especially late in the fight, So it was one of those where get the bite, go for it. Because it's like if I can just get past that first initial push he's got, there's a good chance you'll find the finish.
Yeah, because you weren't, like, you could tell you weren't on high up on his head. Sometimes you can see the whole back part of the head and like the crown of the head, and that's not as bad. Like you're talking, you were deep. His head was buried in there. You could see like the back of his neck. So there's a lot of little things that make that better. And the timing of the fight it's always a good time to put on a finish. Particularly.
Yep.
Where you were. It wasn't quite to the end, but it was definitely, the timing was there that you kind of needed to go for it, because we've seen guillotines, because of the way people do takedowns, it can be dangerous when people really burn out their arms 35 seconds into round one on a guillotine. They kind of have to choose what they're going to do, because guillotines are weird. I feel like rear naked chokes, your power is more directly connected. Like you squeeze, you let go, whatever. But guillotines, I've seen guys that they clearly think they've got it, and they burn to the point where they're pretty much useless after that. So obviously, you know that. Are you kind of aware of energy management, where when you need it, you go, but when it's not there, you're not gonna like burn out? There's that balance. You had 11 amateur fights before. So is that, I mean, it's something that people need to know. Guillotines are not just something you slap on and go for broke. We've seen so many guys, they don't do the little things to make it tight, and the next thing they know, their arms exhausted. Then they're back on their feet, hands by their waist, blocking punches with their face, which is always, a great strategy. So what are your thoughts on kind of the way you do? Because I think you are a bit of a submission guy. I mean, you win everywhere, but you definitely know the submission world.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Especially guillotines, right? Because they can be so tricky. It's like you think you've got it, and it's so deep and it's so tight, but it's like you fail to realize that their chin has moved
Yep.
2 degrees.
Yep.
You know, and it's just like the whole thing's gone. It's like, yeah, it stinks in there, but they can breathe. So it's like as long as you remain calm, they're fine. It's like
it's not pleasant.
So,
it's not pleasant.
yeah,
but,
right. But it's like you'll be fine.
And at your pro level, you know, you were 1-0, took a big step up in competition. Welcome the fact that you said it on here that in your area, you know, pros that aren't 6 fights into the pro career were turning you down. And obviously, I think Patton was on his 6th or 7th pro fight and had a 3-fight win streak. He's going to accept the fight because he needs his career to keep going. And you were willing to take that bump up and go after a guy that obviously a win over him means a lot. You knew that ahead of time. I mean, it's really, really exciting to see that. And I've known Patton a long time. He can be proud of what he did probably right up until the finish. It was such a great back and forth fight that there's a lot of great moments. I called his last amateur fight and all of his pro fights, I believe. And you know it because you felt it, but that was the best long striking he's done. I mean, he really was finding that ability to be a distant striker. Obviously it's very impressive, the victory, but I was trying to, encourage him that he had a lot of things going right in that fight. But it's the fight game, and he gave a lot of credit to you too. He's a great guy. And, obviously that's what's great about a submission. You got a submission and it was a great win. But I've just thrown out there that the general is getting better. It's tough when you get better with a loss. You had that as an amateur. You were 6-0 as an amateur, ended up 2 losses, but you were still getting better despite the losses. So it's kind of always a weird thing. I wanted to kind of come full circle. You were kind enough to come on the show before, and I said, "Oh, you don't have a nickname, Kyle Zimick. What a great name, And you said, "Well, maybe think of a nickname, throw it out there." I said, "Well, I'm going to wait to see how you fight, and of course, we'll just see what happens with this, whatever happens." But after the fight, it was so exciting. I interviewed you, and I remember thinking, "Man, you're a real problem for anybody at featherweight at the pro division. If you could take out Justin General Patton on a hot streak and all that in enemy territory, in front of his home people and all that." So I started thinking, you're a real problem. In fact, you're going to be problematic for anybody at that weight division. So my suggested nickname is Kyle Problematic Zimick. Try that on for size. Let's see if it goes anywhere. But even if it doesn't catch on, you are a real problem. And that's a compliment, of course, that you've put that long amateur career where you really built, made sure you had everything you needed done so that you could take on these more experienced fighters. And I'm sure at 2-0 now, you're going to be taking on more experienced guys because the 1-0, 1-1 guys aren't going to want to touch you when they see who you just defeated. No thanks. So congratulations to you, headlining an event in an enemy territory, coming out with a huge win. So I appreciate you coming on. You've been listening to Luke Basin with Kyle Problematic Zimick.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, sir. Take care. Best skills to you.
You too.
Thanks a lot. Congratulations.